Welcome back, everyone. Today we're ditching the wetsuits and oxygen tanks, but we're still going deep, deep into the world of Buddhist philosophy.
Always a fascinating journey.
Today we're diving into cause and effect and the nature of reality, all through the lens of, get this, excerpts from Vietnamese translation of a key Buddhist philosophical text.
I'm excited to see where this takes us. The Vietnamese Buddhist tradition has a unique way of exploring these concepts.
It's not every day you get to unpack wisdom that's been passed down for centuries. And trust me, this text doesn't disappoint. It jumps right into the deep end with these 10 causes, or Than in Vietnamese. And then it gets even better with the 15 bases of dependence, YSA.
It's like they've given us the blueprint, the cosmic recipe for how things come to be. Not just a cake, though. We're talking about existence itself here.
It's mind-blowing. And what I find really interesting is how they break down these causes into different types. Like Kindan Hun, the seed-attracting cause. It makes you wonder, are there forces out there that kind of pull us toward certain outcomes?
It's a really intriguing idea.
And then there's Sun Kua Hun, the arising cause, the moment everything aligns and that seed finally sprouts. It's giving me chills just thinking about it.
It's a far more nuanced view of cause and effect than just saying, this caused that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's not just a simple straight line from cause to effect. It's more like a complex web of different factors all playing off of each other.
Exactly, like a domino effect. Or, even better, a spider web. You touch one strand and the entire web vibrates. These 10 causes and 15 bases give us a detailed map of those vibrations, those chain reactions we experience as life.
And the best part, this isn't just some abstract philosophy we're talking about. This stuff is incredibly practical. Take the YEs, the bases of dependence. They're like the fertile ground that allows those causes, those non, to take root and grow.
Right. If you want to understand why something happens, you can't just look at the immediate cause. You have to look at the underlying conditions that made it possible, like a gardener assessing the soil before planting.
Exactly. And just like with a plant, some conditions help us thrive, while others can hold us back. The text mentions these tung vi hun, basically obstacles or roadblocks on your path.
Right, and then you have the but tung vi han, those unexpected detours that can actually lead to new opportunities. It's like having X-ray vision into our lives.
Seeing the hidden connections, the unseen forces shaping our experiences. And this is just the beginning. We haven't even gotten to the 5 fruits yet. The qua, which is where things get really interesting. So we've been talking about the causes, the non, taking root in the why, the bases of dependence. But what about the results? The outcomes of all these actions? What happens then?
That's where the 5 fruits, or qua, come into play.
And let me tell you, thinking about some of these really makes you reconsider some of your life choices.
I know what you mean, especially that deep, the fruit of different maturation. It's like the actions we take now can have consequences that ripple out not just in this life, but in future lives as well.
It really makes you think twice about that extra slice of cake, doesn't it?
It's about understanding the long game, the impact we have not just on our present selves, but also on our future selves, even across lifetimes.
But it's not all happening in some distant future, is it? We've also got the unglu kwa, the fruit of similar continuum. That seems a lot more immediate, more like cause and effect unfolding in our present lives.
Right. It's like the idea that what goes around comes around, but with, maybe a few more layers of complexity.
Yeah, it kind of makes your head spin when you try to picture it, Like right now we're experiencing the unglu kwa, those instant results of our actions. But at the same time, we're also setting in motion those long-term karmic threads with the dutho kwa. It's like we're living multiple timelines all at once.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Now, there's one fruit among the 5 that seems to stand out. The lai hua, the fruit of disconnection. What's that all about?
Well, if we think of suffering, like, being stuck in a cycle, the lai hua is basically the way out.
Like breaking free.
Exactly. It's about reaching that state of awakening, where we cut through those chains of ignorance and attachment that keep us bound to that cycle of suffering.
Okay, so that sounds amazing and all, but how do we actually get there? Is it all about, like, balancing the scales, trying to avoid bad karma and rack up the good karma point?
Well, it's not so much about keeping score. It's more about understanding the root cause of suffering.
Which is?
Ignorance, plain and simple. It's about learning to see past all those illusions clouding our judgment so we can experience reality for what it truly is.
Speaking of illusions, the text goes even deeper into this whole idea of the nature of reality with the 3 natures, or tutan, as they're called.
Now we're getting to the really good stuff.
It's like looking at reality through not one, not two, but 3 different lenses, each one revealing a different layer of what's really going on.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So picture this. Imagine you're watching a movie, right? The screen itself, that blank canvas where the movie is projected, that's like the Binkia Suchaptuntan, the imaginary nature.
The illusion of a solid, independent reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's easy to get so caught up in the story that we forget we're just looking at light and shadows.
We forget it's not real.
Exactly.
So if the imaginary nature is the screen, what's the projector?
The projector. That's the Wetsuits, the dependent nature. It's what gives those images form and substance, what makes the whole thing possible.
Okay, I'm following you.
It's like seeing how everything is interconnected, how everything arises in dependence on something else. We see the characters, their relationships, everything that happens on that screen, and it all points back to this intricate web of causes and conditions. And for the final piece of our movie analogy.
Let me guess. The film itself.
You got it. The actual story, the underlying reality that exists beyond the projected images, that's like the vientantutaten, the perfectly accomplished nature. The truth is always present, whether we see it or not.
Like the film reel still exists even after the movie ends.
Exactly. The story is still there. So we've got the screen, the projector, and the film itself. We've got the illusion, the interconnectedness, and the underlying truth.
It's a powerful analogy.
But I have to ask, this perfectly accomplished nature, it all seems so abstract. How do we connect with something that feels so far removed from our everyday experience? So we're looking at reality through these 3 different lenses: the imaginary, the dependent, and the perfectly accomplished natures. It's a lot to take in, but how do we go beyond the theory? How do we actually experience that deeper level of reality, that perfectly accomplished nature?
Well, that's where the concept of emptiness comes in, wouldn't you say? Kong?
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's a concept that tends to trip people up.
I can see why. It's easily misunderstood.
People hear emptiness and they think it means nothing exists, like a void. But we're talking about something way more profound than just nothingness.
Exactly. It's more like, think of the space around us. It's not empty. It's full of potential.
The silence between the notes that makes music possible.
That's a good way to put it. And that can be pretty unsettling if we're clinging to this idea of a solid self, a fixed and unchanging reality. But when we start to see through those illusions...
That's when things get interesting.
Exactly. That's when emptiness becomes, liberating.
And the text doesn't just throw the word around. It actually breaks down this idea of emptiness into 3 natures of emptiness, Kongtan.
It's like those Zen koans, those riddles designed to shake up our thinking.
Exactly. So let's break them down, make some sense of them. First, you've got Tung Kongtan, the emptiness of inherent characteristics. It's basically saying that things don't have some kind of fixed, unchanging essence.
A flower is only beautiful because our minds perceive it as beautiful. Those qualities aren't inherent to the flower itself.
Then there's Sankongtan, the emptiness of independent origination.
Mm-hmm.
This one really drives home the point of interconnectedness. It reminds us that nothing exists in isolation.
Right. That flower you mentioned, it doesn't just exist on its own. It needs the soil, the sun, the rain.
Yeah.
Even a gardener who cares for it. Everything's connected.
Like the old saying goes, no man is an island.
Exactly. And finally, we have Kangaya Komtan, emptiness of ultimate meaning. This one's a real mind bender. It's realizing that all those stories we tell ourselves, the meanings we attach to things, they're ultimately got empty.
So it's not that life is meaningless, but the meaning doesn't come from some external source. It comes from our direct experience in each moment.
You got it.
So when you really look at it, emptiness isn't about a lack of something. If anything, it's about possibility.
Freedom. Freedom from those attachments that keep us from experiencing the richness of life.
Well, there you have it. From the 10 causes to the 5 fruits, the 3 natures of reality, and finally, these 3 natures of emptiness. It's been quite a journey.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We've really had to stretch our minds today, but I think it's been worth it. Hopefully, this deep dive has given you, our listener, a new perspective on how to see the world around you, and maybe even yourself. Until next time, keep exploring.